one thumb to open up my cylinder. Some people will use two thumbs. Some people even use their fingers and pull it towards them. I find that with small pieces very uncomfortable. So I like to use my thumb, and I'm going to put my thumb straight down. And like everything else, you know, just as you're learning this process of making a cylinder form, I'm still going to pin tool it, and I'm looking for something that's about 1/2 inch, no less than 1/4 inch. I don't want to go too thin too soon. As I'm working the clay, maybe some of you have noticed that when you're working the clay, it does thin down a little bit. So that's why that 1/2 inch is a nice place to kind of guide for. Because time I'm done, I know that I'll have about 1/4 inch. So now I'm ready to open, and I'm going to get some water on it. And I'm going to push my thumb, you know, and I'm really going to open that wide. So I'm going to take that clay, and I'm really going to open wide. Now, fundamentally, one of the things to me that's very different about opening up a cylinder is that, one, I push the clay flat across. It's not a curve on the bottom to begin with, and I actually opened up a little bit wider than I know my end piece would turn out to be. And the walls, even on the outside, look like a cone, like a short cone already. So they're not flaring out. So when you think about when I'm making a bowl, right, my sides are kind of flaring out a little bit. But now they're even already looking like a cone. So to me, this is like one of the most important stages, is that I need to go in and compress the bottom. Make sure that I'm compressing it nice and flat. Just as a couple other, because I took it out. Do you have a D-rib? Make sure I give it back to you. This is one of the few times that I like to use my D-rib. Is that I'm going to use my D-rib to help compress. But when I'm compressing, I just said this to Ceramics One, and they're building coil pots. When I'm compressing, hear this, kind of absorb this. When I'm compressing, I'm not changing a shape. I'm making it stronger. So if I'm compressing so hard that it changes the shape, or it thins it out, then I'm using too much pressure. So if you're compressing something and it's going out this way, you're pushing too hard. If I'm pressing down into it and it starts gouging it, you're pressing too hard. So again, think about it as cause and effect. So what I'm going to do is use my D-rib, and one of the reasons why it has a hole there is a lot of people think, oh, to hang it up, but it also gives you a place for your hands to hold onto it when a tool is wet and slippery. So it gives you that little place also to hold onto it. And I don't hold off in a tool like straight down. You're going to see that many times that you hold a tool at an angle and you work into something. Okay. So what I'm going to do is actually use this to compress the bottom a little bit. And so I'm going to hold it in at an angle, and I'm just pushing just enough where it's really pushing in on that floor, and it makes it super smooth. I'm going to stop so you can take a peek. And so you can see that the wall and the floor have a really nice right angle. You see how it looks like it already has a nice right angle? You want to come and see, Chris?
Yeah.
So it has a nice flat opening and a nice right angle. And look at how thick and chunky those walls are, right? So that's compressing that bottom. That's a really important stage in everything that we throw, but here we are for that base form, because this is a lot of clay. So now the next thing that we want to think about is that we want to bring this clay up. We want to actually bring it straight up. But centrifugal force wants everything to go outward. It's like the universe, it's always expanding. And so we have to think about when we're going to pull, we have to think about always pulling into the center. That's so important. Into the center, not out. We want to pull that way. We want to pull this way because we're watching it, and next thing you know, we're like this. And that's why things get wide and they flop. But with nearly everything, it's really important to think about pulling into the center. So there's one little trick that I can offer you, and people approach this in many different ways. ways, and they call it many different things. I always call it, you need to make the volcano, because that's funny enough to remember. So once I compress, I get to that place, I'm going to make the volcano. And just a simple way to start learning how to do it is that I'll take my sponge and I'll hold it in both hands, kind of like this, so that I have a flappy part of the sponge. And so right in front of me here at 6 o'clock, I'm going to come in with my wet sponge, and I'm going to lean into the clay, and I'm going to push it inward. Just slowly and gently inward. So do you see my volcano? That really is one of the important things. When I'm throwing and not teaching, I'm still making that volcano, but I'll do it with my thumb. And I'll throw one for you so you can see how I do that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to compress this rim because that's really important. And I'm thinking about now all this clay that's down here that's pretty thick. And if you're not sure how thick it is, pin tool it. Stop the wheel and pin tool it. I'll do that on my second pull. So now I'm ready to pull, and I'm going to give it some water. And all of this clay down here, to help myself, sometimes I'll take my sponge hand, and I'm going to push in just a little bit. Do you see how that even started to push in that wall a little bit? Push in that wall a little bit? So that clay, that's my first pull that I'm going to take from the bottom upward. So my inside hand is going to be out here. In here, I'm going to rest my thumb. My outside hand is really working with my middle finger and guiding it with my pointer finger, and my inside finger is my middle and my pointer finger as well. And so I'm going to line them up. It's about 5 o'clock where my hands are, and I'm going to start bringing them up slowly. And I'm thinking about easing away at this point. If I continued that pull, I'd make my rim too thin too soon. And then I would have really thick pots with the rims that explode. So if you have rims that are separating, that means you are pinching too hard when you're pulling, you're not easing up at that rim, and then you are not compressing it. So now I'm going to do my routine. I'm going to take the old water off, and in cylinders, that's even more important than bolts. I have to take my fingers, however you want to hold your sponge, and make sure it's going. Don't do it when it's stopped. And take out that old water. Because when I pulled, all the water on the side of the walls all dribbled down to the middle. That's what it does. Okay? That's why we have to take the old water off. So I'm going to do it again. I'm going to pinch in from the outside. That's the clay that I'm going to lift up. I'm going to give it some new water, and I'm going to pinch and pull my clay up slowly. And I'm adjusting my fingers as I reach to the top. I ease my pressure off and take my hands away slowly. So now I'm going to take my sponge and I'm going to take away that old water. And I'll even take away the old water. And I'm going to compress with that rim. And just for fun, I'm going to see how much clay I have at the bottom. So I'm going to take my pin tool and very carefully, I'm going to hold it down here. I'm going to pinch it through, and I can feel it just on my finger. And at the bottom, I have about a ½ inch. And in the middle, I have a little less, and at the top I have a little bit thicker where my rim is. Okay. So I know I have one more good pull on this pot. Okay. So I'm going to push it in a little bit. This will really help you if you remember to do that. It takes away some of that excess clay that you're never going to pull. If you have a lot of clay building up here, you're making it harder for yourself. You need to clean that away. If you're having problems cleaning that away, okay, and you get a lot of clay there, use your straight edge and put it down. Don't hold it this way, hold it this way, and you'll scrape some of that away. You want to see your wheel head when you're throwing. Okay. So now let's go ahead, let's give it some water, make sure it goes all the way down. inside. So now I'm gonna do my last pull, and I'm really feeling with my inside hand, my fingertips, feeling that wall. And as I bring that up, bring it right to the end. Take that old water away. So in theory, just making a cylinder, my top and my bottom should be about the same diameter. Okay, just thinking about a cylinder, nothing fancy, nothing else. Okay. So I'm going to take it away here, it's a little bit of my excess clay, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a tiny little bevel on the bottom, and I'm going to go ahead and take away that little bevel of clay. So here's my waste clay. So now, I might look at my cylinder and I might think to myself, well, there's a couple areas that I need to work on. It caves in just a little bit, it curves in. I'd be really happy with it, but I'm thinking, well, I want to straighten it up a little bit. So a nice straight edge. You know, for me, cheap as chips, a credit card rib works really nice. There's all sorts of fancy ribs out there, really long ribs, short ribs, but you have to have a rib that you feel good holding in your hand. So the D-rib works perfectly well, okay? So it might be the one that you're comfortable with. You'll often see that I use my credit card rib. I'm gonna use this first. So again, I always make sure that my edges are clean. I'm gonna give it just a tiny bit of water. And I'm going to straighten it up just a little bit down here. I'm going to push out from the inside, and I'm going to bring up my rib and just straighten her up a bit. And that's pretty good. So I just cleaned it up, but again, I didn't hold it straight. When I brought it up, you could see that I was pushing up against it, and my hand was turned slightly towards me. That's because I don't want to get my corners or my points stuck in anything. So I'm just telling you stuff that, I'm going to be honest, nobody told me. I had to figure it out. Why do we do it the way that we do it? Everybody, I always say this, everybody's basically doing the same thing. Okay. So here I have my basic cylinder. I bet I can pull one more time. I'm okay with this. I like the width, I like the height, I like the thickness. I tend to throw just a little bit. So I'm going to go in the middle. Pull that up. I always get to peek first. And yeah, I could pull one more time, but I really like the evenness of the walls. That's ultimately what I'm looking for. We can see where the bottom is. We can see where the walls are. I would have very little trimming to do. That's kind of the goal of a cylinder form. Very little trimming to do.